So let's switch a little bit to another aspect of your career that you do amazingly well. And the audiences of Pacific Symphony have been so lucky to see you do this. And I say this all the time, you are the best on the planet at this work. And that is conducting a live symphony orchestra in conjunction with the film that you're seeing on the screen. And I would love to hear, like, what was the first film that you conducted a live orchestra for? And what the heck did you do to prepare for that? And what are some of your favorite films that you've conducted?
Wow. The first film, music to picture that I conducted, well, the first I did was working at MGM and at 20th Century Fox, actually on the scoring stage. I conducted a number of scores, pre-recordings, recordings, supervised music on certain features where we would pre-record music and take it on the set and all that. And then, you know, conducting scores. So my first experience was, you know, the real deal in the studio. I think the first ones I did were actually compilations. A gentleman named John Goberman, who put those together. He was the producer of Live from Lincoln Center, and he would do A Night at the Oscars or music from films about dance. And it would be Robin Hood, Wizard of Oz, Ben-Hur, and there would be like 10-minute segments. So that was really the first. And as far as the first entire film that I did, I think I would have to say it was The Wizard of Oz, and which was basically starting with the toughest. And I studied it for about a year. One of the problems in Wizard is that the Munchkins don't sing in the same tempo as the orchestra, and the Tin Woodsman, when he creaks, his aluminum creaked at a different tempo than his steps when he was dancing and he was singing. And so I had to sort of figure out a common medium. One of the things, the way we do it, in case people don't know, these old soundtracks are all mono. So the dialogue and the music is married with the sound effects. It's all on one strip of film. So what they do is they digitize everything. They erase what they can of the original orchestral playing, because the live playing will take over. Somehow, technically, they readjust it so the voices are above the orchestra, that kind of thing. It's very technical. And when I'm conducting, I actually can hear in my monitor where I have the voices, I can hear a little bit of the orchestra. But the audience only hears the live orchestra because that's out front. And so in doing Wizard of Oz, it became basically like doing this Broadway show on steroids. You know, the easiest part of that whole film was Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow, because she sang, we accompanied her, and that was it. But as soon as you got into all of the other things that had to synchronize so carefully, the dancing and all of that, it was really something. And the night before, the first time I conducted it was with the Dallas Symphony. And the night before, I literally slept an hour or two. I mean, I was sweating bullets. And, you know, Gail was there, and, you know, I'd be studying. She'd come in, are you okay? Are you okay? And I would say, not yet, you know, but.
Well, wasn't that film done with the clock? Because tell our people the different ways that there are to do it. It's gotten much easier, but this was old school, having to do it via the clock. And that was what blew me away.
Yeah, in the beginning, when I did this, I would ride my horse up to the concert hall and tie it up outside, and I'd come in. And it was done two ways. If it was a silent film, there was nothing. It was the picture. And you memorized every frame of the picture, and you would conduct to what you were seeing. And if it was a Charlie Chaplin film, he would do all of these little kinds of things, blip, 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 and, you know, you'd be really having to to be very careful and the minutia. Then with the others like Wizard, it would be a sweep hand clock in front of you. So I'd have the clock and I'd have the picture on another monitor, 2 monitors. At first the clock was a clock, then they put it on a screen. And you literally would see the sweep hand, the second hand going, and on the score you would indicate where you needed to be in that minute. And that's what you did. It was almost like, painting by the numbers. And some people have said, well, it must be pretty easy since the picture never changes. They always sing the same tempo and all that. Well, if you've got 80 people that you have to bring along with that, and they're all spread out and everything, and it's a challenge. It's a great challenge, and a lot of fun to do. My goal was always to recreate the score as people heard it in the original film. It wasn't to put my own stamp on it or anything like that. It was, and the great thing about the older films like Casablanca, Wizard of Oz, Psycho, those films were all done in mono. And so the orchestra would be buried in the back and was very one-dimensional. But when you do it live, there are so many overtones and so many colors that you never hear, Wizard of Oz, for example, that you never hear in the theater because it's sort of a flat sound as opposed to a live orchestra. And it's an amazing experience to do. I've done, I guess now I do about 27 or 28 different films. I do all the John Williams films, all the Pirates of the Caribbean, some of the Star Trek films. I mean, the list goes on and on. Some of the films that I just absolutely love doing, Amadeus, which I've done with many orchestras. About 2 years ago, I did it with the New York Philharmonic. We did 5 sold-out performances, which was extraordinary experience. Last year we did, with New York, we did Psycho and Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1 week. So orchestras are embracing this kind of thing. Silverado, we premiered that film live with the Chicago Symphony. San Diego Symphony, we did Star Trek Beyond. And Paramount thought so much of the whole experience that we premiered it outdoors in IMAX, the first time IMAX was ever done outdoors, with the symphony and chorus and all of this. And they did the premiere with a red carpet, and they had Conan O'Brien with a pre-show, and they had all the stars. And so films in the concert hall, it really is an art form. And it basically transports people onto a scoring stage. And not many people have that chance. And when you're on the scoring stage, all bets are off. It's live. And the film may be as it is each time, but the orchestra is live. And,
That's great. It's really great. And nowadays, more of the films are on what we call click track, right? Where the conductor has the headset with the click of the beat going on in his earphones, and then the musicians have a similar set of earphones in, and it makes it a little easier to coordinate as long as everybody is paying attention to what's clicking in their ear. And I know there are lots of stories of technology, and at least the old way with just the time clock, it didn't rely on technology so much. It relied on you, dude on podium, don't mess up, as opposed to, if the click accidentally goes out because the power goes out or something like that.
The click track is a great tool to keep things in synchronization. However, musically, the click track can work against the actual music itself. And what I like to do, usually, it depends how much rehearsal we have. The less rehearsal, the less the musicians can look up and really follow the conductor, and so the click comes into play. But what I really love doing is having a click myself, and nobody else does, except maybe, like with Amadeus, the pianist will have a click, because we have to synchronize. We see Mozart's hands on the screen, and it has to be dead on. There is no gray area. So I have the pianist with the click and myself, and the orchestra follows me, and that to me always works best, because the orchestra will always, be liquid a certain amount, and so you let them go the way they're going, and then you bring them back, and it's sort of like molding something and all. So that's always the best, I think. I think, but yeah, there are a lot of tools to use.
Let's back up to an earlier part of your career. And you just talked about how you were a freelance violinist and that you even played for Pacific Symphony as a violinist. I didn't realize that until today, so that's pretty cool. So tell me how did you get into playing in the Hollywood studios as a violinist? And then how did you make the transition from being a violinist to a baton waver?
Oh my gosh. By the way, I have to add one more thing. The time that I had with the Dallas Symphony, I was their principal Pops Conductor for 14 seasons, and now I'm Pops Conductor Laureate there. I should have mentioned them before, because that was an incredibly important part of my life musically. And, and really all of that occurred and sprung from the initial being with Pacific Symphony, because Pacific was really the first sort of, Pops Conductor-ish kind of thing that I did, where I had the responsibility of the programming and all of that, other than conducting for people like John Denver and Andy, where sometimes I would program a first half every so often, but they would usually do the whole show. But I mean, it all, started off with Pacific, and, beyond grateful, for that. The studio work, oh gosh, I will try to keep this succinct. When I was in college at San Fernando Valley State College, which is now Cal State Northridge, all I wanted to do was conduct Broadway. I would have given anything for that. And I volunteered to be part of that wherever I could. And so there was a production of the show Bells Are Ringing at the Valley Jewish Community Center. And there was a notice on the bulletin board in the music department saying, wanted conductor or music director, whatever, for production of Bells Are Ringing. Well, I grabbed the thing and I called. I didn't even know what it was for, except it's a show and they needed a conductor. And I did this show. And during the rehearsal period, the people participating were, these adults who were donating their time to the center to make money, as a benefit for the center. And that's what the show is for. For me, this was Broadway. This show had to be prepared. Everybody needed to know their lines, the lyrics, sing together, be on time, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, so one day, this man shows up at the rehearsal and he said, I want to meet you. My name is Sid Feller. My wife, Gert Feller, is in the chorus. And she's been telling me about you, and I just wanted to come and meet you and say hello and have a chat. I said, wow, okay, great. And we talked, and then he said, do you play an instrument? I said, I play violin. He said, would you like to play in the studios? And this was my fourth year of college. I went 5 years because I was having a great time. And I said, well, yeah, that would be great to play in the studios. He said, well, I've got your number. I'll call you. Sid Feller was Ray Charles' arranger and had been with him and had arranged for you name it in the music world. I mean, Victor Moan, on and on and on. Sid had a man named Sidney Sharp call me. Sid Sharp was one of the 2 or 3 busiest contractors. He was a great violinist, was in the Philadelphia Orchestra one time in the studios. And so I get called to do a session with a group called the Grassroots singing group. And it was 3 violins, a cello, and a viola. Sid Sharp, Bill Karash, and myself, Jesse Ehrlich, and Sam Bogosian. Sam Bogosian, one of the great viola players. Jesse Ehrlich, one of the great cellists. And here we are, and it's like that great line that George Gobel had on The Tonight Show when he was sitting there, and I think Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. came out, And George Goebel said to Johnny Carson, "Did you ever feel like the world was a tuxedo and you were a brown pair of shoes?" Well, I was this brown pair of shoes sitting there, not nervous at all, playing this, like this sort of thing, and just sitting there and playing, put a headset on for the first time. And I started getting called to do studio work. And I got called to do the Grammy Awards. And the Grammy Awards at that time were not televised. They were at a hotel. And I was in the orchestra. And they had all of these writers, all of these songwriters, on the show. Henry Mancini, who had just done this recording of Romeo and Juliet, and Sergio Mendes, all these great recording artists, and Burt Bacharach. And Burt had done a musical called Promises, Promises that had just won the Tony Award for Best Musical. I had memorized, I'd worn the record out, a record, that round thing with a hole in it. And I'd worn the record out, and I went up to Burt, and I said, "Mr. Bacharach, I'm in the orchestra." You could see that. I was standing with my violin. I said, "I just want you to know how much I love your musical, Promises, Promises." And he said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Would you like to do it?" And I thought he meant in college when they release musicals after they've had their Broadway run and the national tour, colleges. I said, "Oh, that'd be great." He said, "Well, give me your phone number." I gave him my phone number. The first national tour, Promises, Promises, was about to open like 3 months later at the Amundsen Theater in Los Angeles. And this was going to run for 4 months. It was this major Tony Award-winning musical, the biggest deal on Broadway. And I get called to be one of the 6 violins in the show at the Amundsen, which I started 2 days after I graduated college. I'm downtown at the Amundsen, and I do the show. The conductor is a great guy named Don Jennings, and the assistant conductor is a pianist named Bill Mays, one of the great jazz pianists. So Billy Mays was the assistant conductor and really had never conducted, but the pianist was always made the assistant conductor. Bill Mays goes up on the podium at the end of one of the first shows to do the bows music. It's just, he does the bows music and people are bowing and he walks. He does it. We finish. Bill walks by me through the back and he says, "I'll never do that again." He hated conducting. So about 10 minutes later, I'm standing at the door, the dressing room door of the conductor, Don Jennings, saying, "I understand Bill doesn't want to conduct. I can conduct." And Don says, "Okay." So now I'm assistant conductor of the show. Don's letting me conduct. It's like living this out-of-body experience because I've gone to shows at the Amundsen and all this, and suddenly I'm in the pit conducting the show. And I do the show, and we finish the run. I'm then out of work. I'm living with my parents for about 3 months, I guess it was. And the phone rings one morning. I'm laying there on the floor. I'm sitting on the floor in the living room watching The Price is Right. I'll never forget. And it's a man named Hal Hastings. And Hal Hastings is the music director for Stephen Sondheim and Hal Prince. He had done the original Damn Yankees, you name it. And they had just done a show that won the Tony called Company. And Hal Hastings said, "The first national tour is on the road. We're at the Amundsen Theater. We're about to close there. We're firing the conductor. Would you be interested in taking over the tour?" And I'm thinking now, and I'm 22 years old, sitting there. And I said to him, he said, "It's for 8 months. You do 4 months of national tour cities, Philadelphia, et cetera. Then you do 4 months of one-nighters, a bus and truck, a one-nighter, a show every night in a different city for 4 months." And I said to him, "Well, could I have some time to think it over?" He said, "Well, I need to know soon." I said, "Well, what if I let you know like tonight?" He said, "I need to know sooner than that." I said, "Well, what if I call you this afternoon?" He said, "No, I need to know sooner than that." swear to you, this is the whole conversation. I said, well, my mom's out shopping. I'd like to ask her when she gets home what she thinks. He says, no, I need to know sooner than that. I said, when do you need to know? He said, I need to know now. I said, I'll do it. And that was the whole conversation. The next day I fly to San Francisco. They hand me the scores. I watch the show. I fly back to LA on Friday, put all my stuff in a trunk, fly back to San Francisco. Monday, Stephen Sondheim, Hal Prince flies out from New York, and Elaine Stritch was the star of the show. And Elaine was a tough cookie, wonderful woman, but she was tough. And she had the other conductor fired. They wanted to have a dinner on the off night, Monday night, so she could meet the next victim. And we had dinner, and Hal Hastings and Hal Prince flew out. And we're sitting there, and we had a great dinner. And the next morning, Hal Hastings says, so when do you think you'll be ready to do the show? And I had studied it over the week, and I said, I think I'm ready now. That night, Tuesday night, I do the first show. And did it for 8 months. And Elaine and I got along great. Quick story, the following Saturday, we're doing a matinee. This is at the Curran Theater in San Francisco. We're doing a matinee. And we finished the show, and I go to my dressing room, and I'm starting to change. And the assistant stage manager comes down and said, what are you doing down here? I said, what do you mean? The show's over. He says, you need to come up on stage. Stephen Sondheim is here giving notes, unannounced. And my life passed before my eyes. And I ran upstairs, and the whole cast is on stage. Nobody had told me that they were going to be doing this. And there's Steve Sondheim. And he'll never forget, he's going through this legal pad, giving notes. And he sees me, and he goes like this. I come out on stage. He said, all right, the conducting, perfect tempos, perfect this, perfect that. And the whole cast applauded. And I was this close to bursting into tears. And I said to him, I said, thank you. I said, can I have those notes? He gave them. I still have them to this day. And it was living this dream that was beyond that. So I finished doing company. And the way I'd gotten that show was that Jonathan Tunick, the great orchestrator who did Promises, did all of Steve Sondheim's shows. Well, Burt Bacharach had recommended to Jonathan me, because Jonathan had asked about me. And so it was sort of like you tell a friend and you tell a friend, and that happened. So then Joe Papp of the New York Shakespeare Festival, after company, hired me for 9 months to do Two Gentlemen of Verona, the national tour, which we played at the Amundsen again for 4 months. And so that was sort of the first part of this, leading towards the film part. Now I start conducting also while I'm doing these shows for John Denver. Lee Holdridge was John's conductor and arranger, orchestrator, but Lee was doing film, writing film and television. Couldn't do a tour, so I was sent out. So I'm doing that at the same time. All the time I'm doing these other shows, I'm writing letters to Edwin Lester, who is the founder and director of the Los Angeles Civic Light Opera at the Dorothy Chandler. Mr. Lester produced the original Kismet, Peter Pan, Song of Norway. This was legit old time, in a sense, musical theater. And I wrote him letter after letter after letter all through these years, these 4 years. Dear Mr. Lester, I know I've been conducting Promises, and Two Gentlemen of Verona. I had been told he had nicknamed me that rock and roll conductor. And I wrote him, I said, all I've ever wanted to do is Rodgers and Hammerstein and Lerner and Lowe. And I went on and on and on. And finally, in 1975, I was, like 25 years old, 20, whatever it was. I get a call. Mr. Lester would like to see you. And my eyes, like in a cartoon, like this. And I go down to the Dorothy Chandler Music Center, and there's Edwin Lester sitting there with Jerome Chodoroff, the playwright. And I walked in, and Mr. Lester, he says, sit down, Dick. He says, we're talking about Wonderful Town. Wonderful Town, music by Leonard Bernstein. and I'm just trying to not, you know, scream. And he hired me on the spot to do this show, during which I met the lady who became my second mom, Nanette Fabre. Nan, one of the greatest people who ever walked the earth and ever walked a stage. And we were friends up until she passed away last year at 97. I mean, friends. She called me her other son. So, going back to Promises, there was this dancer, this 16-and-a-half-year-old dancer who lied about her age to get into the show. And when I saw her, it was like the thum, the thum, the thum. And we were standing backstage, and the star of the show, Tony Roberts, wonderful actor, said, "You two are the youngest kids around here. You ought to be dating." And so we did for a year and a half. And we went our separate ways after all of that and got together. And we've been married now for a long, long time. And so Gail and I met on Promises. Anyway, I met Nan on Wonderful Town. Then I did the musicals for LA Civic Light Opera for about 4 years. And now we finally get to the answer to your question about film. I was playing in the studios all during these years. When I would do a musical, I was freelancing as a violinist. So during the day I'd go play, and then I'd go to the musical. It just worked. Somehow God made it all work. So I worked a lot at MGM. Remember the show Chips about the Highway Patrol? Played on all the episodes of Chips and all this stuff. And met Harry Loyevsky. Harry Loyevsky was head of music at MGM, had been there for years, started out as Fred Astaire's rehearsal pianist. That's how long he'd been around. Was considered one of the great minds in the music of the business of music, publishing and everything, and supervised music, was head of the music department. Harry and I would talk about musicals, because I'd be doing the musical down at the Music Center and all this sort of thing. So he calls me one day and he says, "We're doing a film called Those Lips, Those Eyes. It's all about summer stock musicals. And would you be music supervisor?" Because I was doing musicals, and I also was familiar with film and all of that. So we did the film. It starred Frank Langella and Glennis O'Connor and Jerry Stiller. A wonderful cast. Tom Hulse, one of his first films, who went on to play Amadeus. And we had 24 playbacks. We went to Cleveland for 5.5 weeks and shot the film in a real summer theater at night. We had to shoot at night because it had to be, we shot all night long. So I did this film and, excuse me, and finished the film. And about a year later, Lionel Newman, who's head of music at 20th Century Fox, called and said, "We have a lot of television shows." They had like 12 television series that they were doing. He said, "I need an assistant. Would you want to do that?" And it meant I would have to give up playing in the studios, playing violin. I would be not a 9-to-5 job. This was like a 7 to 10 job. But it was getting into the business, into the world of film music. And I said yes. And my official title was music associate to Lionel Newman. Excuse me. So I was there, and it was eye-opening, amazing. And I got to spend more time with John Williams, because I had played on John's scores. Jaws was about 6 years before that, the first film I played on of his, and had gotten to know him. And his office there were 3 offices. There was Lionel Newman, John Williams, and mine, and then secretaries and clearance people and all that. So we were in the same bungalow at Fox. And I did that for about 2.5 years, learning amazing things from Lionel. He was a real character. He was one of the great characters in film. And just hearing stories, and he would say to me, "I want you sitting in my office, listening to me talking on the phone to people." And I would sit there and listen to these conversations, none of which are repeatable in front of ladies. And it was really, Lionel was something else. He was something else. So then he tells me that I won't be needed after a certain date because all the TV shows basically were going away and there was no place for me and all that. But he wanted to know if I'd like to do a feature. And I said, sure. So I did this movie, Man with One Red Shoe, with Tom Hanks and all these people, Carrie Fisher and all these. A really good film and very, very exciting to work with Tom. But after that, I would have nothing, no work, out of work. And I was, in my mind, just panicking because I knew that I'd been blessed up to that point with unbelievable opportunities, and it couldn't last. It's like an actor always wondering, are they going to ever have an acting job again? And I got a call like in May from Harry Loyevsky. And the film with Tom was going to start in August. And then I had committed to conducting a score for a composer in London in October. So in May or early June, Harry calls and said, listen, the music coordinator of the studio, Al, I forget his last name, who was in his 80s, he said, he has to leave. He can't do the job anymore. He literally can't walk up the steps to the dubbing stage. He said, are you interested? And I said, Harry, I said, I would give anything to do it. I said, but I've committed to do this film. And my commitment was always, if I'd accepted a job, I would never turn anything down. Okay. I remember I accepted a church job once on a Sunday, no, on a weekday. And Jerry Goldsmith was going to record the score for MacArthur. And I got the call for 4 days of recording. And I said, I can't do it. I've accepted this. That was always that's the way I did it. So I said, Harry, I'm doing this film in August and September. And then October, I'm committed to going to London for like 3 or 4 days to conduct this film. He said, well, look, give me a call when you get back and, let me know what's going on. I said, okay. So June, July, August, I do the film. Whitney is born, and I'm thinking I have a daughter, I better darn well have work. And I do the film in London, end of October. I get back on the 4th of November, a Thursday. On the 5th, I call Harry Loyevsky. And I said, Harry, you said to call, I just got back, I'm finished. And, he said, when can you start? He said, I've held this for you. I said, anytime. He said, come in Monday, November the 8th, 1984. I'll never forget. And I became music coordinator for MGM and went on to be music director, supervisor. And then when Harry retired, I became vice president of music at MGM. And that's how I got into film. One story about Harry Loyevsky. He was an amazing musician and a saint. About 3 weeks after I started at MGM, Andy Williams calls and says, I'm about to do my first Christmas tour. It's 5 weeks long, but I just need you to come and do the first show so that the pianist, Vinnie Falcone, can play the show, and he's going to conduct the tour. But he needs to get his feet wet and all this. So you'll just conduct the first day, the first performance. I said, sure. So I fly to Milwaukee and do the show. Afterwards, Vinnie Falcone comes to the dressing room. I'm there with Andy, and Vinnie comes in and says, I can't conduct this show. It's too much. There's too much playing. There's no way the pianist can conduct this show. Andy looks at me and says, can you stay with us for the next 5 weeks? And I must have been out of my mind because I called Harry and I said, Harry, I have a question to ask you. I was going to be back next Monday. Well, what if I didn't come back for 5 weeks? And I explained, and Harry said, fine. So I did the tour with Andy and came back, and I was at MGM for about 19 years and proceeded to, do what I did, conducting scores, hiring composers, publishing and all that. And it was, an amazing time. And during that time, Pacific Symphony, was happening. And
You've had so many opportunities in your lifetime, and I want to ask you about one more this afternoon. One of your superpowers seems to be teaching celebrities how to do things that they don't know how to do. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the folks that you've worked with. I think Susan Sarandon, Dudley Moore, Tom Hanks. Who else am I forgetting? But anyway, just give us a little sense of what that kind of work is like.
Well, in the movies, actors sometimes portray characters that have to look like they've been playing their a musical instrument for 20 years and are artists and, virtuosos. And I was hired the first time to work with an actor named Armand Assante and with Dudley Moore on a film called Unfaithfully Yours. They both had to look like violinists. And so I worked for, 2-3 months every day with them. Dudley had played violin as a kid, so it was easier. Dudley I worked with on conducting a little bit. And so I did that, and then sort of got known that I could do that, and I was called to do the Man with One Red Shoe. That's the one I did at Fox, and I had to help Tom Hanks to look like he could play violin. He was supposed to be concert master of an orchestra, and he had to play the solo from Scheherazade. So it wasn't like Armand Assante, who was playing the third movement of the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. Here was Tom, doing Scheherazade, and also Carrie Fisher flute, and we had Jim Belushi playing timpani, and David Steyer's conducting. So I was kind of working with them. Although with Carrie for flute, I got a flute player to work with her. Tom was great. We had so much fun. He lived a few blocks away at the time in a much smaller house than he lives in now. He would come to the house literally every day. And I had a little guest house in the back. We go back there, and nobody should have as much fun as we had. It's just, there should be a law against that, because we had a great time, and he worked hard. He worked hard enough that we were shooting the film. We're going to shoot part of the film in Washington, D.C., and we were going on location. And Tom said his brother lived in Washington, D.C. and played the guitar. And was there any way that I thought that Tom could learn a piece of music and play it with his brother? So we went to a music store in the Valley, and we got a Beatles songbook and came back, and I taught him, I think it was Yesterday, some slow song, da, 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 ya, da, da. Maybe that or something else. I don't remember. And we got to Washington, and one night we went to his brother's apartment, and Tom played the violin and his brother played the guitar together. And it was great. It was really a lot of fun. Then I was asked to work with Jack Nicholson on the film Witches of Eastwick. And we worked together at his house every day for 3 months. And the director, George Miller, said, will he be okay? I said, if you could plan to shoot the music of these scenes at the end of the shoot, because we were going to Massachusetts to shoot the majority of the film. And we went back on location, and I worked with Jack every day. I was there, and all. And then we came back, and the film, the scenes with Jack playing, he was supposed to look like he could play a Paganini Caprice on the violin and accompany Susan Sarandon in the Dvorak cello concerto, looking like he was playing piano. So we worked and worked and worked. Came back, and they shot the scene with the Paganini, and he did a great job. He really did a good job and worked very, very hard. One thing I discovered about people like Tom Hanks, Nicholson, Armand Assante, Dudley, these people, they know what is at stake. When you make a film, it's there forever. And it's 30 feet high, and you better darn well be doing it right, or people won't believe you. So they all worked hard. So Nicholson and I worked, and we would have dinner together sometimes. He would say, I don't want to work tonight. let's just eat. And the two of us would eat and talk and talk and talk and talk. And then we got to the scene, if you remember Witches of Eastwick. Did you see the film, by any chance? You know, okay, you should see the scene. The scene is Susan Sarandon is a school teacher, very, very shy, unassuming. You know, she's going to, be alone her whole life. Jack Nicholson plays the devil. Also, there was Cher and the blonde actress, whatever. The other one, famous blonde actress. Anyway, so the devil was going after these three women in this New England town, and his goal was to bring Susan's character out of her shell to the point where they would do certain things that probably shouldn't be doing. And there's a scene where Susan is playing the cello and Nicholson has showed her on the violin, has played the Paganini, and now he said he's trying to entice her to play the Dvorak with passion, dripping with, all of this emotion and all that. And it's the Dvorak. And Susan, I got a cello coach to coach Susan. And Susan got really good too. And Susan starts to play, and Nicholson is on the piano, playing piano. And the music is da 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 on the piano. And before we shoot the scene, Jack comes over and he says, "Do you know how to play that Dvorak?" I said, "Well, yeah, why?" He said, "Well, George wants to shoot close-ups on the hands." He says, "So you do those." I said, "Jack, you can do that." And he probably could have. He said, "Nah, you do them." So they shaved my arms up to the elbow. They put me in Jack's costume. And in the movie, when you see these close-ups, and there are a lot of them, the hands of Jack Nicholson. I mean, that's Hollywood, right? But I
love it. Now I'm going to have to go watch that movie because I got to see your hands.
Well, I'm not telling you about the scene because if you haven't seen it, you need to see the scene, especially that scene.
Excellent.
So anyway, that was one part of it, and Nicholson, and it was great working with those people because as in the music area, in a studio, you're working with everybody. You're working with the director, the producer, music publishing. You're working with the sound people. You're on the dubbing stage with the orchestra contractor. It's an all-encompassing job, which I loved. Couldn't get enough of it.
Right. Well, Richard, we want to thank you for taking so much time to tell us so many things about your history and your experiences. And I just personally want to tell you that it's an absolute joy to work with you. I've been really lucky, and I've learned a lot from you in these last many, many years, and I'm a better person for knowing you, and I really appreciate that. And I cannot wait to see you again and to throw my arms around you and give you a big hug and to have you conduct the musicians of Pacific Symphony live on that stage for a full audience. So thank you so much.
You are absolutely an extraordinary person to work with, Eileen. People need to know that in your job, you are in the middle of the storm all the time. If it's not one thing, it's another. You're dealing with artists, you're dealing with musicians, heaven help you, you're dealing with conductors, and you do it with such grace, and you are such a sweet person. And for me, it has been beyond wonderful to work with you. And you have been so patient with me because, as you can tell, as you've been able to tell, I mean, there are things that I'm passionate about, and it takes somebody with the soul of patience and calm to take those things and deal with people who are passionate, and you do it better than any, as well as anybody I've ever seen. And I also have to say one more thing. Again, being a conductor, any success you have is because of the people playing the music. I mean, it is just a fact. And yes, the conductor adds certain things, and you can program and all that. But in the concert, the music is brought to life by people who care about it, who have studied for years to do it. They care also about the audience. They care about the responsibility and the passion that they have for being a player in an orchestra. And Pacific Symphony has a lot of challenges, unlike other orchestras. And the musicians of this orchestra are truly remarkable in what they do musically, what they do as people. And it's something, in this whole issue of the pandemic that we're going through, people talk about what are the voids in your life, this is right, one at the top of the list. And I too look forward to getting back and hugging and waving and and being with the audiences and with everybody. So my heart is there, and hopefully all of me will be.
I'm giving you a big hug from here, my friend.
Me too.
We'll talk to you very soon.